Greetings and welcome to Talk a Little, Learn a Lot, the American Society of Naval Engineers podcast. I am your host, Stephen Phillips. In this podcast, we talk a little and learn a lot about naval engineering while inspiring the next generation of STEM professionals. Today, I am joined by Rear Admiral Calvin Foster, my Naval Academy classmate, and we are here during the 2024 Naval Science and Technology Symposium, specifically the Combat Systems Symposium. During this week, we're going to study real-world operations and conflicts in both Eastern Europe and the Middle East. During the symposium, participants will delve into our offensive and defensive weapons that have been used or may be called into service, tactics used to employ those weapons, and how we maintain and sustain those weapons to ensure they are available when needed. The symposium will also look at future weapons capabilities from both the benefits and challenges perspective. I was able to hear Admiral Foster's discussion of this today, and so I'm looking forward to continuing that discussion today with the Talk a Little, Learn a Lot audience. Admiral, thank you for joining me on the podcast. I look forward to this discussion.
Thank you, Steve. It's great to be here, and I'm very thankful to the American Society for Naval Engineers and the Office of Navy Research for hosting this event.
Sir, will you begin perhaps by introducing yourself to the Talk a Little, Learn a Lot audience?
Certainly. Calvin Foster grew up in a small town, Bristow, Oklahoma. Decided to heed the call of a naval career after a lifetime of legacy of people in my hometown, in my community, and in my family urging me to a higher calling of service. So joined you at the great United States Naval Academy, graduating and beating Army our final year, which was the most important piece. And then graduating with a general engineering degree and then moving on to be a surface warrior, both active and reserve over the last 32 years. I'm privileged to have been a part of many different commands, commanded 7 different reserve units, and most recently been pulled on active duty for the last several years, running the reform efforts for the McCain and Fitzgerald in the Pentagon, activated as the Maritime Operations Center Director in the 2nd Fleet, and then fortunate to pick up for flag, and my first admiral job was as the Vice Commander of U.S. 6th Fleet, and the Director of Maritime Partnership Programs for Naval Forces Europe and Africa.
And what's your current role, sir?
I am currently the Deputy Commander of Naval Surface Force Atlantic in Norfolk, Virginia, commonly known as Surfland.
You started your keynote talk today with a story about responding to, or at least preparing to respond to, low, slow flyers and small boats in the littoral. Could you relay that story again, please?
Yes, certainly. The privilege I had to speak today was really about delivering a message to the technical and research community about what is going on in the fleet and what kind of lessons we can draw from on warfighting advantage. Warfighting advantage simply is the ability of our warfighting forces to be at an advantage against our enemies and threats. And so the Aegis community specifically has driven its origins, as well as the most advanced weapon systems today, always pacing that threat. In my civilian job, I have been able to work with the Aegis community for decades, and I relate a story of something that happened a little over 20 years ago that was based on some similar guidelines that we're talking to today, Admiral Meyer's admonition to build a little, test a little, and learn a lot. And when that same perspective is applied to all of the arrays of the gaps and capabilities of the Aegis weapon system, at that point, there was certainly an uncovering of a gap between the ability of the weapon system to detect, track, and engage and successfully eliminate the threats in the low, slow flyer, very small radio cross-section, and especially in the littorals, where you had to set up your Aegis weapon system in a little bit different parameters. On top of that, they also found gaps in the ability to detect, track, and engage small craft. At the time, the Iranian threat was starting to elevate, and there was a lot of attention paid with the very challenging piece of radars trying to detect things on the surface of the water. pass that correct information to the weapons pairing, both in missiles, guns, and close-in weapon system. So it was a challenge at the time because there were not a lot of abilities to test in those types of devices. We did not have a low slow flyer target. We did not have a high-speed maneuvering surface target that you could float on the water remotely and engage it at high demands. So I wanted to make sure that I gave some praise to the technical community for recognizing that challenge way back over 20 years ago, because the first part of my message to the technical community and research community was thank you. Thank you for the investment. That investment is the return on we're receiving on that investment right now with our sailors at sea is truly paying off, and specifically that low slow flyer threat, and that's really handling the threats in the Red Sea, the ballistic missile threat as you see in the Eastern Mediterranean, and the small target threat. So I finished my story outlining the events that happened in Puerto Rico at the time. We used to have a training base called Atlantic Fleet Weapons Test Facility in Roosevelt Roads, Puerto Rico, and a variety of tests were taken on a variety of number of ships, the most memorable being DDG-84 USS Bulkley, commanded by then Commander Carlos Del Toro. So I think we can see now the Secretary of the Navy, Del Toro, certainly benefited from that investment that the technical community made. So that's the big piece of the part of that story, is to characterize the investment that we made and how it's really paying off with our sailors today.
And we were fortunate to hear him today also as our closing speaker. You spoke of having a culture of healthy debate. Share that with us. What do you mean when you're saying that we've got to have a healthy debate in naval engineering?
Interestingly enough, I actually started down that pathway during my comments today as a reflection of earlier panels. If you get a chance, the listeners get a chance to come and attend an ASNI event, especially an event revolving around combat systems, you're going to see a pretty healthy dialogue and debate that's out in public. Admiral Tom Dickinson had spearheaded an event earlier with a panel of several of his program managers. And I noticed, listening to them and watching them, that they were even engaging in certain debates about technical readiness levels and how we would go about identifying the right type of technologies to be inserted into the acquisition process, which is very defined. And I was really encouraged by that kind of open perspective. There are hundreds of people here at the conference, and none of the captains were afraid to engage in that dialogue, and Tom has been fostering that for a while, obviously. So it's one thing I've always enjoyed with being a prior test engineer, because if you do testing right, you're going to find a lot of problems. And it's ultimately if you find the problems and you characterize them as risks, and then you start buying down the risk either with modifications or systems or potential funding that needs to be adapted, then you can really understand what you're doing. Because the other dynamic is, especially in the test and evaluation world, is if you're not characterizing that risk in the benign environment of modeling, simulation, or digital twinning, or on the range, they're transferring that risk to the warfighter, to the captains of the ships, to the sailors, to the fleet commanders. So the more information we can find out earlier on in the technical and research side, the less we have to find out when we're on the pointy end of the spear, because at that point we just want to know what our capabilities and limitations are and execute properly. So it was a really interesting dynamic of today's events.
One of the things that I enjoy about this symposium is all of the conversations about combat systems. And you talked about the employment of combat systems during your talk today, sort of as you surveyed things that were going around the Sixth Fleet AOR and, around the globe. One of the things was, it's amazing to imagine this, that if you're a surface warfare sailor today, you could very easily find yourself in combat and engaging the threat. You talked about we're engaging cruise missile threats, we're engaging ballistic missile threats, we're engaging unmanned threats. Could you unpack that a little bit more for us and describe what it is that those that are employing combat systems, especially in the surface Navy today, what they're experiencing?
I'll elevate it a little bit. the second part of my talk was really about innovation. And so I thank you for the investment, and then a recognition of the innovations that have happened across the fleets. And I'll use Second Fleet, Sixth Fleet, and Fifth Fleet in that discussion, because I've had, while a direct involvement in Second and Sixth Fleet, been supporting Fifth Fleet in their areas, especially in the Red Sea. And I kind of hit a bunch of different types of, well, I'll say, threats, and how our forces have been kind of countering them. The one that doesn't get as much play in the surface domain, but certainly there's a big part of it, and that's the air policing part. So since the war started between Russia and Ukraine, there's been a very deliberate effort, and I'm glad to say a very streamlined effort at the NATO and U.S. force level and allies and partners to streamline our air policing. That's combat-ready forces that are literally surrounding the combat zone areas in ways that respect sovereignty, but also defends and deters any potential actions that might spill over. And so those aircraft that are constantly in policing areas, all controlled either by land or maritime forces, are really on the tip of the spear on the readiness piece. That spills over to some of the ballistic missile defense piece. Now, while we have surface vessels that have air defense and ballistic missile capability, those are purely in a detection mode, obviously, in this case, but ready to defend themselves if needed. But as the October 7th attack occurred of last 2023, and the Houthis and the Hamas and Hezbollah elevated all of their attacks onto Israel, we also saw an incredible escalation of these types of systems that are employed against the Maritimes, the common areas and choke points, like the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, the BAM. So when we saw that, the Houthis, which turned out to be a pretty credible a threat as a violent extreme organization, they started fielding anti-ship ballistic missiles, anti-ship cruise missiles, air and surface unmanned systems. These were all kind of thrown out in different varying ways and vectors throughout the Red Sea region, mostly in their particular random attacks on any shipping that was in the Red Sea, but also aimed northwest into Israel. So as we were defending our ally and partner there in the Eastern Med and Red Sea, we recognized real early, because our ships were ready, fortunately, to repel those attacks. And now we've seen over dozens of different types of drones and missiles thrown at us, and we're again continuing to reflect the appreciation we have with our sailors that they were able to repel those attacks. Now, what that means is we have to then look back at all the other aspects of the support for those sailors: rearming, resupplying, potentially repairing, ensuring that foundation as we deploy more types of ships out to that area, that they're ready. It's a tactics question. It's a elevation of the combat systems capability. It's a closed-loop systems engineering process that feeds the pacing of that threat, or what the changes are that the enemy is throwing at us, so we can reconfigure and refigure our tactics and our systems so they can meet the demands of the threat in the future. So it certainly has created an entirely new level of readiness and expectations, both at the fleet level and back home here in the systems and research level.
Admiral, you told the audience about deploying to Cyprus for 4 months. Would you share that story also with the Talk a Little, Learn a Lot audience, please?
Of course. One of the challenges of being a reservist is that you need to be on call and ready to go where the Navy sends you. You have to kind of put your civilian employment on hold, and your family has to adapt. And I'm happy to say that the last couple of years, the Navy has enabled me to be on active duty about 80% of the time the last 2 years. So that means that I've been over there available for Admiral Ishii, who is the 6th Fleet Commander, and Admiral Munch, the Naval Forces Europe and Africa Commander. And what I found is that there was a lot of activity going on that they really needed a one-star to kind of go and be the face of the fleet to them. One of those cases was as the war in Israel continued to ramp up, and in Gaza, the administration at the State of the Union address, President Biden declared the use of a JLOT system to deliver aid directly into Gaza. There were already aid pathways going from air and from land, but this particular option was presented to the president, and he directed it to happen. So the Third Army and the CENTCOM team had assembled a large group of maritime capability there to deliver joint logistics over the shore, JLOTs, into Gaza, and the origination of that aid was going to come through Cyprus, which is in EUCOM waters. So the flow of the Cypriot maritime corridor, which had already been established, was kind of augmented, if you will, with military forces from multiple countries, not just the United States. And my job was to be there as the Deputy Joint Task Force 406 Commander to facilitate that and to coordinate activities in the EUCOM waters in support of JLOTs. So little did they know when they assigned me that time that I had actually built JLOTs as a naval beach crew, beach master, and amphibious Seabee in my previous life in the Navy, as well as a recall that I had been on in 2010 to Kuwait serving with Third Army. So I jokingly say I have the Third Army patch and I speak Hua, so I was uniquely suited to support that effort, and certainly enjoyed being able to be there in Cyprus, appreciate Cyprus, both the beautiful country and the great partners we have there, as well as the reduced presence of Russia in Cyprus, which has enabled a lot more activity for the freedom and democracy-loving countries to support. I think it was an open door for U.S. AID to lead that way, and of course the UN was leading the way on supporting Gaza with aid. And so we end up delivering over 20 million tons of aid into Gaza with about 3 different stabs there for the JLOTS terminal into Gaza. So on top of that, Cyprus is a very frequented port for us, thanks to, again, the partnerships that we have there. So we routinely pull in ships, submarines, aircraft, Marines in there to do training, to do refueling, to do different mid-deployment voyage repairs, etc. And so I was able to, at the beginning of April, to start to meet the ships that pulled into port. One particular ship caught my attention because the USS Arleigh Burke was commissioned about the time, Steve, you and I graduated, that 1992 time frame. And it always struck me that the original warship for the DDG class, the now legendary Arleigh Burke class, started at the same time we kind of started our Navy career. So the USS Arleigh Burke specifically has been a real inspiration to me. And so and the other benefit of being in Cyprus was my wife was able to join me, my wife Nicole. So she and I were spending some time entertaining the captain of the ship, Ty Bowman, and making sure that his team was taken care of. We made a couple of visits to the ship, and before the ship finished its port visit there in Larnaca, I was able to have a few minutes talking to the crew, and in that discussion over the 1MC, I just mentioned to them that, Arleigh Burke said that this ship is built to fight. You had better know how. And I know they had heard that before, but it was a powerful statement to recall and remember the great Admiral Burke and what stamp he put on the DDG program. So little did I know that just a few days later, after she left Larnaca, this oldest destroyer in the United States Navy fleet was firing the most advanced standard missile weapon system that we've ever had in the massive defense of Israel against a barrage of attacks from Iran. Another testament to the the Missile Defense Agency and to the Ballistic Missile Defense Team. We have a task force in Sixth Fleet, the CTF-64, led by Commodore Mike Dewan, who have invested heavily and were all over this threat from the beginning. I can't go into too many details, but certainly having the ability to detect and engage with multiple different platforms, aircraft, ships, joint partners in combination with the Israeli self-defense systems really rendered that attack impotent. And that's a true testament to the USS Arleigh Burke and its crew and the investment that the technical community has made in ballistic missile defense.
Admiral, I have a passion for mine warfare, and it's another topic I heard you talk about today. Could you share with the audience what's going on with mines in the Black Sea and how we are responding to those?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I appreciate your commitment and investment in that domain as well as your writings. At the beginning of the war between Russia and Ukraine, well, in the secondary piece, right, beyond the 2014 invasion of Crimea, and this was a couple of years ago, there was a real concerted attempt by the Russians to invade and take over in the Odessa region. And so Ukraine employed mines in defense of that region, and in many ways were using that as a sea denial tactic, one of the many sea denial tactics that Ukraine employed, as well as anti-ship cruise missiles that turned out to be very effective in thwarting an amphibious invasion. The result of those mines, as well as Russian mines, were that as more kinetic activity occurred in those littorals, more mines were displaced and ended up floating in the counterclockwise direction of the currents there in the Black Sea, which meant that their neighbor, Romania and Bulgaria and Turkey and even the Dardanelles were starting to see and experience untethered mines. And so our team at the time, CTF-68, led by Commodore Jeff Townsend, employed unmanned systems and surface vessels, and of course teamed with our allies and partners there to really get after identifying where those mines were and eliminating those threats. We're fortunate that most of the mines that we detected have been neutralized, but there's always, as you know, where you're not looking and is potentially where they are, and so that's a constant demining focus for those countries. So it was a fascinating piece of kinetic spillover, if you will, from the Ukrainian and Russian war, which affected the whole maritime security region. On top of that, there was a Ukrainian grain corridor that was trying to be employed, and as you probably know, as most of your listeners know, there's a breadbasket of Europe basically comes out of Ukraine. During the war, there were still some efforts to continue that flow, and so most of that flow came through the Maritimes. So that mine warfare piece played a part in the effectiveness of the grain corridor to work out. I'll also give a shout out to a reserve capability called NCAGs, Navy Cooperation and Guidance for Shipping. NCAGs units are ones that coordinate and relate to the maritime trade operations leaders. So they're teams that augment our fleet commands and talk to the ships, the local civilian mariners, to help them navigate around threats just like this. So they did a fantastic job, our NCAGs team, led by Captain Aaron Gilmore.
Let's talk about now a topic that is near and dear to your heart. I've heard you speak on this before, MOCs. So one of the things you said was, hey, make sure all of your coordination, whenever you're doing something, even though you're in the engineering field, make sure you're communicating with the MOCs. Could you discuss that in greater detail?
When we break down the levels of warfare, the top level is strategic level, and you'll see the Echelon 1 commands, the combatant commands, the large elements that are manning, training, equipping for our personnel, et cetera. Those are kind of a larger strategic piece of the puzzle. At the far end, you have the tactical piece. These are the true pointing of the spear. These are sailors that are turning their phys key to green and employing their weapon systems in order to defend their ships or defend their allies and partners in the AOR that we've given them. In between those two zones is what we call operational level of war, OLW. And we place the numbered fleet commands probably at the heart of that. There are elements of the Echelon 2 fleet commands, PAC Fleet, NAVIR, NAVAF, and Fleet Forces Command that are part of that OLW team too. But But in most of the application, we have 7 numbered fleet commands. We divide up the whole world into those fleet commands. Those are all run by a Maritime Operations Center director, usually a post-command 06. And I was privileged to be a stand-in for 6 months at Second Fleet as the MOC director under Admiral Lewis and under Admiral Dwyer. But I recognized really quickly how important the Maritime Operations Center director was, because he or she is really directing all of the staff to get after the warfighting advantage that the fleet commander needs to employ their forces that are assigned to them. So it's pure force employment. It's pure operational and planning together. And really it synchronizes there with the MOC director. It's a lot of weight and responsibility, but it's usually the people that we have there are really aware and knowledgeable about it all over the multiple forces that we have. And so my encouragement to the technical and research team is to, while we don't want to overburden our MOC directors, recognize that that's really the heart of the MOC. And if we are going to be successful in sharing information across the Navy, I think we have to be successful in sharing information with the MOC directors and the leadership of the Maritime Operations Centers. Some of that can be done, with some of our systems. Every fleet is at a different state of awareness and readiness based on their fleet command centers and how they're able to present information to the team. Ultimately, the MOCs are there to provide information for the fleet commander to make battle decisions. So how that information is displayed, how that information is integrated between weather, between air, surface, subsurface, unmanned systems, cyber, all of those kind of things culminate there in the Maritime Operations Center, Fleet Command Center, and then how we share that data amongst each other is critical. We will exercise that again for the 3rd time in the upcoming large-scale exercise 2025. We do them every 2 years, starting 4 years ago. And so that's a big piece, because there's a handoff, if you will, of different scenarios between the numbered fleet commands. So there's some automatic flow of information that go through. But I'd also say that as we develop new tactics, techniques, procedures, technical capabilities, demonstrations like we saw today of the counter UAS systems, those things, that information needs to get to those leaderships at the MOC director level. So again, while not wanting to overburden the MOC director with too many meetings, please recognize that that's a target audience for you in the areas that you're trying to develop for the fleet. The second thing I'll kind of combine with that is that at every point of your developmental process and testing process and fielding process, a fleet touch point will greatly increase your ability and your credibility with the sailors in the fleet, because if the fleet knows that it's coming and they can have a hand in it and have some investment in it, there'll be a lot more trust and confidence. They'll be wanting to train about it. They'll be wanting to figure out how to use the system, and they'll want to employ it properly, just like you intended it from your design team. So please integrate more with the fleet. That's my number one message for the innovation piece.
Admiral, I have one last question. You and I have spoken offline on this several times. I know that you want to ensure that the United States Navy is reflective of Native American heritage, and you're also passionate about connecting Native Americans to STEM and connecting Native Americans to naval engineering. Would you talk about that also with the Talk a Little, Learn a Lot audience?
Yeah, thanks. I've been fortunate to have several Native American leaders in my career that I've been able to follow after. But with the retirement of Admiral Trussler and Admiral McCall, I am the lone remaining admiral with Native American citizenship. So I'm a member of the Muskogee Creek Nation from Oklahoma, and I certainly want to do my part to lift the tent poles, if you will, to help other Native Americans come along too. And what you'll find, Steve, is that Native Americans serve at a higher percentage than any other people group in our nation's history. Go back to the Code Talkers, the Navajo Code Talkers, and Ernest Evans, who grew up in Oklahoma and became an incredible surface warrior, giving his life on the USS Johnston almost 200 years, or almost 80 years ago here just last couple months. We've fortunately named a ship after him, DDG-141, the future USS Ernest Evans. And then my wife is the co-sponsor of the first ship named after our tribe, the United States naval ship, Muskogee Creek Nation, reflecting 10 salvage and rescue ships that are the Navajo class. So the Navy has done a great job of recognizing the value of Native Americans and as we all contribute to collective homeland defense. And I'm trying to revive and coordinate some more efforts to ensure that we as a technical community and research community reach out to these fantastic young adults who are seeking a way to elevate their education. Maybe they're on the reservation and they have limited opportunities to learn more about technology, but they're hungry. They're really wanting to learn and join both in our civilian ranks as well as our military ranks across the force. And so I've been teaming with a group called AISES, AISES. This is the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. There's also Sea Cadets, and there's a lot of other organizations, First Robotics, that are all designed to focus on the young adult population. And they're more than welcome to have groups like ASNI and ONR and the Navy and the Marine Corps invest time to talk to them, to go to where they are, to educate them about opportunities. Tribal chiefs that I've talked to over and over reflect a very strong desire for their young adults to go and serve. And then lastly, there's a little bit of a warrior spirit there that we're really tapping into, that most Native American tribes continue to share and revive as sovereign nations, to be able to characterize themselves as the ability to defend their tribe and their homeland. And most tribes have really recognized that the U.S. military is a way to do that. So I'm hoping to continue to build that momentum, and I appreciate the opportunity for ASNI and other teams to partner with the Indian country.
Well, Rear Admiral Calvin Foster, thank you, sir, for taking time today to discuss the Naval Science and Technology Symposium, your thoughts on the future and the state of naval engineering. I hope that we can have you back again sometime on Talk a Little, Learn a Lot, the podcast of the American Society of Naval Engineers.